I thought I was the maid of honor because of our friendship, but I was just a prop for Sabrina to showcase her privilege. I stood in the chandelier-lit Graham Regency ballroom, squeezed into my bridesmaid dress as Sabrina raised her champagne glass with a dazzling smile. "This is Ava Johnson," she announced, "my inspiring black friend, a reminder of how lucky I am to be born into privilege." No laughter, no applause, only the pounding of my heart, ready to burst through my chest. 10 years of friendship, and I realized I'd just been her upscale joke. But when Elliot, her billionaire fiancé, looked at me from across the room, there was no pity in his eyes. It was a look that told me, if I didn't walk away right then, there would be no turning back. We met freshman year at Columbia. I was a full-ride scholarship student working part-time at the library. She was the cross-family heiress, fresh off a summer touring 4 European countries. Sabrina walked into class in a Burberry coat, soft blonde waves, and a perfume I couldn't name. I sat in the back row. Worn-out sneakers, second-hand backpack. Every morning, I had to choose between breakfast or saving money for photocopies. That first week, she sat next to me. "I love your hair," she said, flashing a warm smile. I was surprised she noticed. We started having lunch together, studying. People called me Sabrina's smart, humble friend. I thought it was a compliment. Sophomore year, I juggled 2 jobs, cleaning dorms in the morning, answering hotline calls at night. I was always tired, but I had to keep a 3.7 GPA to keep my scholarship. Sabrina began inviting me to exclusive club events. "You're the only real one in those places," she'd say. I felt proud, seen. Then, one day I overheard her tell a classmate, "Ava makes me feel accountable for my privilege. Being close to her helps me stay grounded." I smiled awkwardly when I replayed that sentence in my head, unsure whether to be flattered or wonder if I was just her rearview mirror. I once thought entering her world was an opportunity. Turns out I was the lens she used to reflect on herself. After graduation, I started at the very bottom in a mid-tier marketing firm. Small office, no windows, but it was my first real job. Sabrina joined her father's investment group. Every week she sent invites, charity galas, art auctions, black-tie dinners. I usually said yes, partly out of politeness, partly because I told myself I was networking. At a French restaurant, I flipped through the menu, trying not to show my panic. Each entree cost half my weekly paycheck. Sabrina smiled. "I never know what to order. Just bring us the most expensive wine," she winked at the waiter. I ordered soup. Watching her pour wine, I wondered, would they still invite me if I didn't make them feel morally good? In Sabrina's circle, I was always the real quirky friend. The way they said it, lighthearted, almost playful, always made me feel like the odd one out. At parties, I was introduced as the one who keeps us grounded. In photos, I was placed just off-center. Sometimes their eyes flicked toward each other when I spoke, barely noticeable, but enough for me to feel off-key. Sabrina once said, "Ava reminds me to appreciate the little things." That quote ended up in a magazine feature about her next to a photo of me smiling. I read it 3 times, first with pride, then discomfort, then nothing at all. At some point, her praise began to sound like instructions. Stand here, be humble, be grateful. I locked myself in the 16th floor restroom, where no one goes after meetings. The fluorescent light above the mirror cast a harsh glow. My skin looked grayer under it. I removed my wig, wiped the glue from my forehead. My real hair underneath was short, tightly coiled, plastered with sweat. I stared at my reflection. No makeup, no mask, no role to play. "Do you even belong here?" My voice was quiet, but it echoed like a gavel in the empty room. I'd tried my best. I was punctual, polite. I worked twice as hard. But in these rooms, I still felt like someone asking for permission just to exist. I inhaled, washed my face, tied my hair back, then walked out. No one knew I had nearly evaporated behind that door. Sabrina's message came while I was working overtime. "You have to witness the happiest moment of my life." Attached was a picture of a sparkling engagement ring on a perfectly manicured hand. A week later, I got the formal invitation, gold embossed, sealed in wax. The engagement party was at the Graham Regency, the kind of hotel you only see in magazines or socialites' Instagram posts. I wondered, was I invited as a friend, or as a symbol of something beautiful in her story? Still, I said yes, just like always. When she called, when she needed someone to stand beside her, when she wanted to prove she wasn't like the other rich people. I told myself, at the very least, it's still friendship, or something close enough. I spent all Saturday afternoon getting ready. The black velvet dress had been cleaned and pressed a week ago. Long sleeves, square neckline, fitted, but not flashy, just enough so I wouldn't disappear in that gilded crowd. I opened a small velvet box. Inside was a string of old pearls my grandmother left me. "Wear this when you need to remember your worth," she'd said. I fastened it, adjusting the clasp so the center pearl rested perfectly at my collarbone. I stood before the mirror for a long time. The dress fit. The makeup was subtle. Everything was fine. But deep in my chest, something loosened. A nameless ache, as if no matter how hard I tried, I'd always be the draft, never quite polished enough to publish. The Graham Regency Ballroom looked like a scene from a film, layers of crystal chandeliers, live piano music floating from a corner. Waiters in tuxedos glided past with trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres. Everything gleamed, flawless, untouched. I walked in slowly, shoulders back, nodded politely at strangers who gave me polite but assessing looks. The women wore couture gowns, high buns, unscuffed heels. I heard them mention charity projects in Switzerland, summer homes in Martha's Vineyard, the newest caviar from Paris. I smiled, nodded at the right moments, tried to hold my posture, but somewhere in the air lingered the scent of not belonging. I couldn't tell if it came from me, or from the glance I refused to catch in the mirrored doors. Sabrina stood beside Elliot, microphone in hand, light pouring down from the ceiling onto her perfectly styled blonde bun. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her smile radiant. "Today isn't just about our engagement. It's about honoring the people who helped me become the grateful woman I am." I sipped my drink, wondering whose name she'd say next. "And I have to mention Ava Johnson," Sabrina said, scanning the crowd for me, "my wonderful black friend who reminds me every day how lucky I am." The room stiffened. A wine glass paused mid-air. Someone gave a polite laugh, then silence. I could hear my heartbeat louder than the music. What would you do if you were called someone's inspirational hardship at a billionaire's party? Would you smile or walk away? I stood still. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if lowering their eyes could spare them the second-hand shame. A hand touched my elbow, light but firm. "I'm sorry," came a deep, steady voice. "You need some air." I turned. Elliot, Sabrina's fiancé. The smile he wore next to her was gone. What remained was silence and a serious gaze. He held out his hand. I hesitated, then placed mine in his, warm, steady, not pulling, not pressing. He led me through the crowd. The whispers faded behind us. Out on the balcony, he closed the door. The city lights flickered below, but around me, everything fell silent. "You didn't deserve that," Elliot said, eyes steady, and I couldn't tell what scared me more, his words or the fact that I believed them. I leaned on the railing, fingers clutching the pearl necklace, not because I was cold, but because I needed something to hold on to. "She's always been the voice," I said, not looking at Elliot. I was the one who nodded, smiled, stood beside her in every photo as the only black face, proof of progress. I spoke of compliments wrapped like barbs. "You're so brave to wear that." Or, "I could never leave the house like that." At first, I thought it was sincere. I told him about the parties, the waiting in the wings while she posed, the missed chances because I was the CEO's daughter's best friend. Elliot didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty lines like, "I understand." He just stood there, listening, as if finally someone was hearing me, not out of politeness but because it needed to be heard. The next morning, I woke to over 30 unread messages and a link shared over and over. The headline glared from a socialite gossip blog, "Curvy Black Girl in Billionaire? Affirmative Romance or PR Strategy?" Beneath it, a photo of Elliot and me on the balcony. The lighting cast my face in sharp clarity. He leaned slightly toward me, as if shielding. The article dripped with words like "an interesting pairing," "a non-traditional match," "the fruit of corporate diversity." Not one line said who I was. No name, just labels. Black woman, social outsider, symbol. No one asked what I thought. No one asked if I wanted to be part of the story. I became a narrative. No one needed my permission to tell. That afternoon, an email arrived from HR. Urgent, personal image meeting request. The small meeting room was bright and cold. The AC buzzed. The HR director sat upright, her voice gentle but firm. "We understand Ava is receiving public attention," she began. "But some recent articles are creating confusion internally." I stayed silent. My heart hit the floor. "Given your role in brand marketing," she continued, "we're suggesting a 3-week unpaid leave to avoid further impact." Unpaid. No wrongdoing. No one asked how I felt. I walked out of that room feeling hollowed out. Turns out, one false story could strip away years of stability. A narrative I didn't write had the power to erase my right to a normal life. I came home and closed every curtain, left the lights off, ate nothing, didn't check my phone. I curled up on the couch, blanket over my head. The only light came faintly from the kitchen, dim and cold. My phone buzzed nonstop. I didn't look. By midnight, I deleted all my social media, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, as if disappearing online might make the storm vanish too. I held my grandmother's pearl necklace in my palm. Didn't wear it. I didn't have the strength. In the dark, I listened to my own heavy breathing, and for the first time in years, I stopped pretending to be strong. I was just tired. Tired of having to prove I belonged. Tired of always being okay. Have you ever wanted to disappear from the world in just one night? That night, there was a knock at the door. Soft, 3 taps. I didn't answer, but Elliot called my name, gentle, low, honest enough that I couldn't ignore it. I opened the door. He stood there, empty-handed. No flowers, no excuses. "I don't know where to begin," he said, "but I know I want to be near you, not for image, not for headlines, but for you." I looked at him. Part of me wanted to hold on to those words, but I shook my head. "I've spent too long being someone else's background, Elliot. If I walk into something now, before I've stood up for myself, then I'm just giving up the lead role again." He was quiet, then nodded. I said softly, "I need to choose me first, and I'm not sorry for that anymore." One morning, I opened my old laptop. My hands trembled above the keyboard. The blank page stared back. I wrote the first line, "Dear Black Girls in White Rooms." I didn't write to justify, not to fight back. I wrote to witness. About feeling invisible in luxury laughter. About the judgment behind compliments. About shrinking yourself just to survive without disappearing. I typed for 3 straight hours. No edits, no backspace. The first blog post went up with no photo, no promo. Within 3 days, it was shared over 20,000 times. Comments poured in, messages from women who'd never met me, but had lived everything I wrote. For the first time, I wasn't a symbol. I was myself, and I was finally being heard. 3 months later, I officially registered my business, Room 29 Media, named after the office where I was told to take a break. Now, it was the start of something new. This time, I decided who got in. I posted my first hiring notice, prioritizing women of color rejected for not fitting the company image. Applications flooded in. I had to borrow a local cafe as a temporary office. I interviewed each woman personally. Didn't ask where they'd worked. I asked, "What story do you want to tell?" Each one arrived with scars and eyes that had never been seen fully. We started small, a campaign for a local Black-owned bakery, then more, then bigger. No one had to stay quiet just to survive anymore. Now we speak, and the world listens. Our first workshop, a rented room, soft yellow lighting, 6 chairs in a circle. On the table, a box of homemade cookies, a pot of warm tea, and cards that read, "You have the right to take up space. No permission needed." 6 women came, each with a different story, different skin tone, different past, but all carried the same hunger, to stop being blurred out. I shared slowly, not preaching, just my path. When I spoke about being a symbol no one asked permission to use, a young woman laughed. Not mockingly, but because she felt seen. That night, I posted a story from the workshop. One familiar name showed up in the views. Sabrina Robertson. No like, no message. But this time, I didn't wait. I don't live for someone's response anymore. I stood center stage, spotlight warm on my face. Hundreds in the audience. But I thought only of the girl curled on the couch once, clutching pearls, afraid to raise her head. "I used to live for acceptance," I began, voice firm but calm. I thought if I was quieter, softer, more polished, they'd let me stay in a room never built for me. A pause, then I looked straight into the camera. But you don't need to be chosen. You have to choose yourself first. I spoke of the old Ava, smiling from the sidelines, being called inspiring, and the Ava now, writing her own story, in her own voice, from the very first word. When I finished, I didn't bow. I just smiled, for the first time, because I truly believed I belonged there. I stepped off the stage, heart still pounding from the endless applause. In that fleeting space between backstage light and the dim hallway, I saw Elliot. He stood in the back row, leaning lightly against the wall. He didn't call my name, didn't wave, he just smiled. A quiet smile that didn't ask for anything. Just congratulations. No bouquet, no grand gesture, no attempt to steal the spotlight I'd just walked out of, and somehow that moved me more than any romantic declaration. Elliot approached. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, just for me to hear. I nodded, gently, the way someone does when they've learned that true love doesn't compete, doesn't take up space that isn't offered, doesn't make you shrink so it can stand taller. Have you ever met someone who made you feel safe? Even without saying a word? On the way to the parking lot, we walked side by side in silence. No awkwardness, no rush. Under the soft glow of the overhang, Elliot paused. A breeze moved between us. "I told you once I wouldn't step into your life unless you opened the door," he said with a quiet smile. "If today you're ready, I'm still here." No pressure, no expectation, just an invitation, light as breath but grounded enough to know this man didn't come to fill a void. He came when I was already whole. I didn't answer with words. I just took his hand, for the first time, on my terms. And just like that, no fireworks, no soundtrack. We began, gently, truly. I opened the front door. Warm, golden light filled the familiar space. Elliot followed a few steps behind, still giving me room. I turned to face him. No more hesitation. No more questioning whether I was enough. "Tonight," I said slowly, "isn't about needing someone to fill the silence." He didn't speak, just waited. No push, no persuasion. "I choose you," I continued, "because I've already chosen myself first." I walked toward him, not as someone being waited on, but as someone walking with intent. No longer the inspirational friend. No longer the one they kept around for show. We held each other, not as an ending to one story, but the beginning of a new chapter. And this time I knew I wasn't following. I was walking beside. The wedding took place in a small garden filled with sunshine and laughter. 30 people. Only those who had stayed, loved, endured. I wore a simple white dress, soft fabric that held me gently. Not to impress, but to feel like myself. Around my neck, my grandmother's pearls. The center one slightly scratched. But I didn't hide it. I let it show. Like me. Imperfect, but honest. And unapologetic about my past. Elliot stood at the end of the flower path, his eyes lit not because I was the dream bride, but because I was me. I walked alone, not needing to be given away. I walked through witnesses who no longer saw me as a background character, but the main one in my own story. A week after the wedding, I opened my inbox to check work emails. Amid congratulations and media requests, there was one I didn't expect. Sender: Sabrina Robertson. Subject: Still just a supporting role, Ava. I opened it. Each line colder than the last, written more to unload bitterness than to start conversation. I thought you'd won, but in the end, you're still just a side character in my story. I didn't get angry, didn't feel sad. I simply closed the email, didn't mark it read, didn't respond, because I no longer lived inside her script. That silence, to me, was the loudest statement of all. I have nothing to prove to you anymore. The morning of the wedding, Elliot sat on the edge of a chair, carefully folding a pocket square. I brought him a cup of tea, then knelt quietly to brush dust from his leather shoes. "You don't have to do that," he said, a little flustered. I smiled and kept going, not out of duty, but out of love. All this time, he had tended to my quiet wounds, with patience, with listening, and today I just wanted to do this small thing, in place of 1,000 thank yous. Love doesn't need to be loud or displayed. It only needs to be real. We no longer walked ahead or behind each other. We learned how to walk together, across grass, across concrete. I held the paper, my hand trembling slightly, but my voice didn't shake. Elliot stood in front of me, not someone who came to fix me, but someone willing to walk beside me. I'm not looking for someone to heal me, I read aloud, my eyes steady. My wounds are part of who I am, and I've learned to live with them. I'm looking for someone to write forward, not erase, not cover, just continue, with respect, with listening, with quiet kindness. He nodded. The garden fell silent. No phones, no cameras, just wind threading through the leaves, just the sound of my heartbeat, clear and sure. I was once a supporting role in someone else's story. Now, I choose to write a new chapter, where I am the author, and the one beside me doesn't hold the pen. He holds my hand. Ava set the pen down on the final page of the manuscript, then carefully signed her name. Below the title, she chose herself. The desk lamp lit her signature, the fresh ink reflecting a gaze full of certainty. No longer the Ava judged in emails, no longer the Ava questioned in boardrooms, no longer the Ava introduced at parties as someone else's resilience story. Now she was Ava, the storyteller, the chooser, the one rewriting the ending. She looked up at the window. Early morning. The city still half asleep. But inside her, everything was awake. No spotlight needed, no glamorous backdrop, just a desk, a lamp, and a truth no longer tucked away. The manuscript closed. But the story was only just beginning. If you've ever walked into a room and felt like the extra piece that didn't belong, if you've ever stayed quiet while others used you as a backdrop for their own stories, if you've ever smiled through compliments that made your heart ache, then maybe, just maybe, you've lived like I did, letting others hold the pen to your life. But now, it's time. Time to take that pen back. Time to stop being a footnote in someone else's chapter. You are you, whole, worthy, learning to love yourself more each day. Write in your pain, write in your dreams, write in a voice no one gets to silence anymore. The pen has always been there, in your hand, waiting for you to begin again. Ava's story ends here, or maybe this is where yours begins. Because somewhere, in every lowered gaze, every unspoken word, every fake smile, you might have lived as Ava once did, waiting to be seen, waiting to be chosen, waiting for an embrace warm enough to feel worthy. But the truth is, you have to choose yourself first. No one can rewrite your life, unless you hold the pen. If you've ever been Ava, or still are, comment, I choose myself, because you are not alone. If this video touched something in you, like, share, and subscribe to help more untold stories find their voice. We'll see you again on your next brave chapter.